Well, yes, indeed. And to talk us through some of those restructuring process and the expectation of Nigerians, Tunji Ariyomo, who joins us now. He's a policy chair on energy and infrastructure of the National Development Initiative. Morning, Ms. Ariyomo, and thank you for joining us today. Well, let's start off with your perception of the reality now that, yes, they're on board. There's been restructuring, both in terms of the ministries and the ministers themselves. In terms of them fulfilling this huge expectation, a lot of them really, what do you see playing out?
First, let me say good morning to you, Tim Allen, Malcolm, Sudan. I believe strongly President Muhammadu can't the text this time by explaining it as with the potential to actually help Nigeria get it done. For we grew up seeing Nigeria things wrongly at each turn, and what has majorly been responsible for this has been the fact that often we have formed a permanent habit of having misfits, handling very critical national assignments. However, with the recent portfolio assignment that the President did, it is very obvious that for the first time we seem to have people who are actually experienced at fixing things, managing critical national needs. For instance, the area of infrastructure, power is being assigned to Fashola, for instance. What that means is that Mr. President is not ready or willing to take any chance with those two critical sectors. And with the capacity Fashola himself has demonstrated, especially if you witness the screening at the Senate, a lot on that day, as I have remarked to my friends, Fashola exhibited a certain level of depth that showed clearly that he had good grasp of the issues militating against us as nations as far as the power sector or as far as our infrastructure is concerned. So it did not come to me as a surprise when I saw him manning those three key areas. While we could say that housing and works are like integral siblings, we all know that power is more related to, let's say, petroleum because it's part of the energy sector. But having Fashola to man this is simply a statement by President Buhari that this time we must get it right. And I do believe strongly that this is very, very doable. And my expectations is that first and foremost, each of these ministers must realize that it is different. The kind of, let's say, fear environment on things not working ecosystem that had become part and parcel of the Nigerian system and which Nigerians were used to before now would no longer be condoned. Expectations by the masses is so high that they want results today. So while we will be patient, we would also expect that first and foremost, policy issues will be addressed, indicate of the direction in which the next set of reforms will take. For instance, if you look at what we have done in the power sector over the past decades, you can only refer to a big shame. That's why I like that headline in one of the newspapers today, referring to what we claimed to be reform as a huge shame. Because indeed, they were not reforms, and if they were reforms, they were merely reforms to better the lot of a few people and probably increase the size of their pocket financially.
Well, that will be a sweeping one, Tunji, but that's your view. No questions about your views on that. But let's talk about the restructuring which this was predicated on. I know the Tunji Jordan Committee did recommend, I think, 19, but now we've got 24 from 48. What do you think is the intention of that reduction?
The president did indicate why that came to be in the first instance. He mentioned that the nation is in dire strait as far as finances are concerned. As in fact, at the time, I think it was in India, he did mention that there wasn't even enough to be able to pay the ministers. So having 30-something or 40-something ministers will be really difficult. Aside this, too, aside the requirements in terms of finance needed to really fund the different many ministries, we also realized that a number of so-called ministries should ordinarily have been departments so as to make them more efficient and then reduce overhead costs because the minister will have aides, those aides will have maybe assistants and so on. So we have this huge overbloated system that made it impossible for things to even move quickly, and we ended up compounding the bureaucracy that were already in place.
All right, let me jump in there and ask, Tunji. I mean, you talk about they will have aides, you have to reduce the ministers to save costs, but if they do the tabulation, there are some questions too that pop up. How much do the ministers earn in the first place? And if they've got aides, if you tabulate all of those, are we saving up to how much exactly? And then the ministries too, are they, now that you merge them, are they going to lay off those workers or they will continue? If they continue, so all of those questions about saving costs, shouldn't they tell us how much exactly is this saving after all?
Chamberlain, I do agree with you that they should be open and give us that much details. But I want you to take this into consideration. When you talk about saving costs in terms of reducing the numbers of, say, ministries, it is not chiefly just about the numbers of ministers or numbers of ministers' aides. Each ministry maintains huge running grants, for instance, which when you reduce them, those also get reduced drastically. And if you check the history of our past budgets, you would realize that all the time we form this permanent or perpetual culture of having our recurrent expenditure higher than even capital expenditure. There is no way that we would be able to get that done without having to reduce the numbers of the ministries and even merge some of the ministries, departments, and agencies, as Mr. President has recently done. I think it's really a good one for Nigeria. And I believe that the next critical thing is to see the direction of governance itself, because we are yet to know that. We need to know the policy direction of this government. We need to understand the philosophy that is driving this government. And also, the ministers need to understand that the expectation of the masses is tied to their capacity to deliver quickly. For instance, this argument is very common, that it has taken us 50 years, that we have experienced this rot for like 50 years, and therefore people should be patient, that it will take several years again to get it right. No, that is wrong. We have development role models in countries like Singapore, Malaysia, where we've had a duo of Mahathir bin Mohamad, for instance, in Malaysia, and Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore. And one thing you realize is that these people were able to catch up. Within the first 10 years, you could actually see appreciable movement in terms of getting it right. So this is the kind of expectations Nigerians have, and these are doable. So we can go sector by sector. For instance, maybe power, national infrastructure. If Fashola wants to get those two right, Nigerians will be expecting results, effectively from within the next 6 months. And he must never think this is not possible. With the right innovation, with the right mind, with the right attitude, with the right kind of people who have the requisite qualification and who have the requisite idea, and also with people who could put apart their vested interest, we will be able to get this right.
Allow me to come in here very quickly. You just painted a picture talking about the time frame and reminding us not to juxtapose the number of years we have spent trying to fix this with the number of time given to this new team. If you look at it critically, some have talked about the common sense that have been put in fixing some of these things in these sectors, specifically in the power sector, in places like Canada, the United Kingdom, and the United States. If we were to bring that back home here and talk about the power sector now, are there any quick fixes that you think that we can quickly put in place to the extent that Nigerians will start seeing the desired result? How difficult is it for us to fix in the power sector?
Sulai, thanks so much. I made a statement somewhere yesterday. I stated that the most difficult problem for the black man is fixing power. Consider, for instance, what happened in South Africa after we took over.